Well, hello there, and you join us here today to ask the question, has the integrated sports watch craze finally ended? If you're looking for an integrated sports watch or any other watch to buy or sell, check out watchfinder.com. Well, as the ongoing turmoil has built to new heights between Tom and myself, I've decided to be the bigger person and bring in a counsellor to help us see our differences. Max from WatchCrunch. How are you crunching?
I'm very crunchy today. Thank you for having me.
Excellent. You've been a WatchCrunch lead figurehead type person for a while. What's happening over in Crunchland?
Yeah, I would like to say I'm the dictator of WatchCrunch, and we're running a great authoritarian regime there. No, things are going well at WatchCrunch. We launched the app recently, and we've had a flood of new users. And if you don't know about WatchCrunch, this is we just got tired of using forums, old school kind of web-based things, and we decided to develop a new platform for talking watches that is suitable for the century that we live in. So if you check out the interface, it's just much more usable, and the community that we've built is surprisingly friendly, and they don't have a lot of hate. So that's what I love about it.
Well, if you're not familiar with WatchCrunch, go click the links, crunch the watches, download the apps, and have a rollicking good time talking about watches. Right, speaking of talking about watches, do you remember around the 1970s when the Swiss watch industry all went to crap?
Well, considering I was not even an embryo, I don't, but I've read plenty about it. And it sounded like a pretty scary time.
It was indeed, yeah. The Swiss watch industry needed to find something new to do with its skill set of making mechanical watches when all of those fancy Japanese quartz watches were taking over. The AP Royal Oak, we understand to be the first of that generation of the new sports stainless steel luxury watch. But there was an integrated sports watch just a little bit ahead of that, the Rolex 5100 Quartz. Max, we were just talking about it beforehand. It's a little bit of a beast, isn't it? But it's quite different.
It's probably the first time that Rolex was ahead of the game. But it's got sort of used car salesman written all over it. But I guess that was fitting for the time.
Tom, if you were a watchmaker in the 1970s, do you think angular integrated watches would have been where you would have taken it?
Yes. Seems like a safe bet. I mean, it's interesting because I think there are certain integrated watches that look more 70s than others. I don't think it's necessarily that there are a lot of watch brands that have like their usual lineup and then like a DeLorean. It's not like that if you were to think of it in car terms. I just think it's just another kind of design motif, isn't it? It's not necessarily brutalist 70s kind of architecture embodied in a watch. But yeah, does seem to be a link between integratedness and 70s-ness, but I don't think that's always the case. But it's a good move, and it's almost evergreen at this point, isn't it? Are we going to ever see an end of it?
Well, who knows? Who knows? So the 1970s, they came and went, and that watch shape came and went. And I remember a time about 10 years ago when everyone looked at the Nautilus, looked at the Royal Oak and went, ugh, gross. The Royal Oak and the Nautilus, we both know, have since come back. And they have come back in a big, big way. With a massive vengeance. Max, are you familiar with why this has even happened?
The only thing that I can, design-wise, I feel like, and I made this analogy in a recent video about the IWC Ingenieur, which is there's confidence and almost arrogance about the design of integrated bracelet watches, right? You can imagine the designer saying, I'm going to design every last detail on this watch, including the bracelet, and I don't want you to touch it with your filthy hands, right? And I drew the corollary to famous architects who designed houses and then built the furniture inside the houses, like Frank Lloyd Wright. And you got to have some machismo, some kind of self, aggrandizing to to be able to pull that off. So I like that idea, the whole piece as one unit of design of art, but it is certainly very confident. So
you're a curtains match the drapes kind of guy when it comes to watches. That you believe that is optimal.
Just IKEA everything. Well, I guess we never really defined what exactly is an integrated bracelet watch, right? Because there's many things I feel like that kind of tread that line in the middle. I mean, I used to think, it's watches where you just simply cannot remove the bracelet, which is not the case. And it seems like maybe we're talking about watches where the bracelet kind of seamlessly blends into the case profile. To me, it's a little blurred.
I think any bracelet can be removed if you try hard enough. It's really just a matter of persistence. But yeah, if we look around the market today and we look at things like the Piaget Polo, that might be considered part of the collective of premium integrated watches. But that has quite ordinary lugs and a strap. That has no seamlessness between strap or case. What interests me actually is there's a couple of pieces that I remember before this era of the craze. The IWC Ingenieur Mission Earth, which had the Gerald Genter-esque integrated shape, if you like, the holes in the bezel, all of that, and the Tudor North Flag. Now, neither of those watches were particularly popular, but they were 2012 and 2015, so close to being popular. What do you think marked the difference between that style being uninteresting to most people and suddenly becoming the hot thing, Max?
Well, I feel like the North Flag was a cult classic, right? It was sort of before its time, and then people sort of turned around and realized what they missed, and then tried to pick one up on the used market. And the thing is, people who wear the North Flag are exclusively watch people, right? Like you're not going to find some Joe Schmo accidentally wearing a North Flag, and I think it's one of those watches that really kind of gained a following afterwards. And when somebody talks about the North Flag, they talk about it passionately. It's not, has a bit of a Marmite effect.
I think the North Flag's really interesting because I think it's one of Tudor's best looking watches, and I don't know why it flopped as it did. I think part of that is because I think Tudor's lugs I find really unappealing. That sounds a bit weird, but I think lugs almost feel like a bit of an afterthought anyway. Like, it's just like, right, we need something to keep the bracelet on, so let's just extrude a couple of pointy bits, and then the bracelet, they're often kind of unfinished, and they just look a little bit kind of blunt and flat and uninteresting. But the North Flag, it feels almost sleek in its design, and I think that's quite exciting. So it seems a shame that it flopped, but I think you can look at watches as being like characters in a soap opera. Like, they haven't killed it off, it's just gone on holiday, and it will come back to rapturous applause at some point in the next series.
Yes. If the return of the Tudor Ranger is anything to go by, they'll bring back the North Flag. So I have a theory that we follow trends in the auction houses, and those auction house trends follow just a certain timeline. At a point where watches get to a certain age, collectors move on from the last lot of things they all bought up and move on to the next. And we saw collectors buying up the sports watches of the 50s and 60s, Submariners, Daytonas, and they moved into the 70s. So the Nautilus and Royal Oak, early serial numbers, A serials, were being picked up. And I think that's probably sparked an interest in the broader community to start buying them new. And of course, the Royal Oak and Nautilus very quickly became unobtainium. But we also have things like the Overseas and the 222. I think the 222 is probably one of the nicest looking watches on the market. Max, what's your take on how the 222 and the Overseas sit together?
I will comment on the 222. I feel like there are some celebrities that really get it, right? I think Brad Pitt has a couple of them.
Yes, Mr. Pitt.
Yeah, Breitling ambassador, Brad Pitt, yeah.
Yeah. And the bracelet design, I think it might be the most attractive of them all to me. It almost looks like serpentine in a way. And just so kind of thin and conforming. So I really dig the 222. The overseas has always been a bit, I don't know, unwieldy for me, maybe because I don't have a big wrist. It just feels kind of sharp and jaggedy. Like there's a lot of like unnecessary triangles and octagons and stuff.
Tom, you've tried on, you've certainly experienced many, the Royal Oak, the Nautilus, and the 222. And I think the 222 was the first moment I saw you actually like a watch of your own accord. Do you remember that special moment?
I do. And I think if integrated cases are done right, I feel like there is a, like that tapering from case to bracelet can be very wearable, like hugely wearable, and I think that's what the 222 is. It's just something about it. It just sits quite right. It's almost like ergonomic. But I think there are different in that regard. I think there are different layers of integratedness, and I think if done really well, I think it looks really sleek. And yeah, like serpentine, I think that's a really good way of putting it. It's just one piece. I think that's the high watermark that you can achieve with an integrated watch.
Almost like the Moser, those Moser bracelets. They're like, it's like a snake when you play with them.
Yeah, the streamliner, and we've seen with the hype from the Royal Oak and the Nautilus, we've seen other brands jump on board to meet and sometimes even exceed what we expect of an integrated bracelet. But before we talk about those, Max, you touched upon something earlier that I think we need to clarify. What do you think are the defining factors of an integrated stainless steel type sports watch? More than just the bracelet, but the overall look and feel of such a thing.
Well, I think with a more like a wider definition, I think you look at the transition between the case and the bracelet, and if you sort of run your fingers, let's say like if somebody blindfolded you, I feel like you should be able to tell that you're holding an integrated bracelet watch. To me, how it's connected, whether it's a pin or a spring bar or whatnot, that seems to be more semantics. Is it like from across the room? Does it look like it's one piece? Yeah, that's. I think at this point that's probably a more apropos definition of it.
I think it's worth throwing into that mix as well the idea of the watch being form before function too, because if you took something like the Tudor Royal, which has a blended bracelet, it still feels like a very functional watch, based very similarly on the oyster quartz. But then if we talk about the Ingenieur, there's a lot of angles and facets and things that go beyond just, I want to tell the time and have a bracelet that feels slickly blended into the case. Where do you think the Tudor Royal still counts as part of that category, or do you think it sits outside?
Not in my mind. When you brought that up, I sort of did a double take, because to me that just kind of feels like Tudor's Datejust, and so I think it's not quite integrated enough in my mind, but the Ingenieur certainly is, and the Ingenieur, I think I recently got to spend some time with a couple of them, and it has that DNA of the SL from the 70s, and just they sort of changed a few of the elements to kind of make it more modern feeling. But that watch, I think, was kind of a even split between the Nautilus and the Royal Oak, right? It wasn't quite as angular as the Royal Oak, but it wasn't quite as sort of dainty and flowing as the Nautilus. And I don't know if we need to talk about the price, but that seems to be the only thing that people are interested in the comments.
Well, for sure, I would chuck in another definition of these integrated sports watches, that typically they are priced higher than you would expect. If we rewind back to the original 1972 Royal Oak, it was deliberately priced as much as a complicated gold watch purely to show, look at this shape. If you have that, you've paid for the look rather than for the functionality of it. So by that stretch, the IWC Max is following in the right footsteps.
I think there's two arguments here, because if you look at the original Royal Oak price, I think in today's dollars, it's still like $8,000, maybe not even $9,000, and so it is a bit confident for IWC to go for like 12 on that. And my gripe with that is they sort of price it out of the hands of a lot of enthusiasts, and that's kind of it's kind of a shame, right? The people that really, really understood this watch and its lineage maybe didn't get to buy one. But at the same time, I think the other way to look at it is, look at what the APs and the Pateks are trading at, and you're getting an integrated watch from a major manufacturer that was one of the 3 Genta watches for a third of the price. So yeah, it really depends on what camp you're on, but it's a great watch. Like, I took it out of the box and I was immediately impressed, and I think that's a watch that looks better in the hand than in pictures.
I think there's an accountant at IWC somewhere who has put a line in the sand based on their expectation, who is going right now.
Yeah, you think it's an arbitrary price tag, but I think it's just like I think IWC like, this looks really good. I think we need to charge more for it. I think that's how they did it. And I think it's true what Max said, it is part of that triple triad of Genta watches, and that's got to count for something, hasn't it? Surely. It's got bezel bolts. That's distinctly Genta, and that's going to cost you.
I think each bezel bolt is worth at least $1,000.
Yeah, that's how it works. Yeah.
Tom, it's not all been about the expensive integrated watches, regardless of whether or not the original was incredibly expensive. There have been a bunch of affordable alternatives too, and I know these tickle your pickle especially. What are some of those that have really grabbed your attention and drawn you into the integrated craze?
Well, the Timex Q reissue Timex is a really nice one. Again, that's one of the ones that feels 70s. I suppose 70s design is sort of famous for the grey box, isn't it? Like, you've got the brutalist architecture, like horrible big square buildings, DeLoreans, and then like square watches, But the Timex is just, even though it is drawing on that 70s, it's really comfortable, and I feel like there is that kind of streamlinedness of it.
You can't talk about the modern craze without talking about the PRX.
Oh yeah, that's the one, isn't it?
Darling child of everyone with less than $1,000 to spend on a watch. Max, it sounds like you've got a bone to pick with the PRX.
Yeah, that bone is stuck deeply into my larynx right now. So first of all, if you commented in my IWC video and said, "Oh, I can buy 200 PRXs with that money," we're not friends, because obviously you're missing the point. So, look, I don't hate the PRX. I don't love the PRX. I have a paralyzing indifference to the PRX. It's a watch that I think it is a great kind of, like gateway watch into this hobby, and I don't fault it for it. But it's in many ways, I don't think it's well executed in the shape of the case where it meets the first link on the bracelet. It just gets stuck there, and so it just kind of flares out. So the 40 wears bigger than a 40. The 35 is better on my wrist, at least. The dial is great, but they're obviously, like, it's a pretty blatant kind of copy of the Royal Oak. But then, the hands are just like stamped flat pieces. right? So they kind of felt like an afterthought. The markers are so skinny, and when I put a macro lens on it, the lume is sort of printed like a bit like on every marker. It's slightly off kilter, and so these little details. I mean, I understand it's a less than $1,000 watch, but I think you yourself, Andrew, is wearing a watch that maybe is a good argument for an alternative to the PRX.
Yeah, absolutely. You're referring to Christopher Ward's The 12, and I'm sure people are sick of me talking about it, but the reason why I talk about it so much is because it offers such an enormous value for money. And it really does. It's a very, very well put together watch. Lots of great... Everything the PRX doesn't have in terms of that next level of detailing, it does have. Granted, it costs a little bit more, but... it's ballpark, isn't it? It's enough to go, I can comfortably get a PRX. I could stretch to the rubber bracelet stainless steel 12. I suppose at this point we come to the big question. I'll pose it to you first, Tom. Integrated watches. Are you sick of it?
I'm not, personally. I don't think it's like a craze that is as much of a groaner as like Tiffany blue or something like that. Do you know what I mean? I feel like it's just another design tool that watch designers have in their locker, that they can draw upon. Hey, maybe this watch might suit an integrated bracelet. I don't feel like it needs to be the whole package of like a porthole dial with a waffle texture and an integrated bracelet. It's like you don't need to go full Gerald Genter with it. I think an integrated bracelet
never
can be
go full Gerald Genter.
I think an integrated bracelet can be a nice, an elegant solution to like a watch. So I don't think it is. I think it's a craze that is fine. But yeah, I mean, I've got a larger problem with the kind of whole 70s porthole bolt bezel waffle dial angle than just the integrated case on its own.
Yeah,
Max, what do you think? What's next for the integrated craze?
Well, I think anytime there's a craze, right, there's a feeding frenzy. I feel like by definition, it very quickly becomes uncool, right? I think of like like the Uggs, the shoes, right?
Yeah.
They gained popularity too fast. And at this point, as much as you like that integrated shoe design, you don't want to get one because you realize that you're just falling into a stereotype. So I think we let the dust settle a little bit. I think for me personally, when I think about my core collection of like 8-10 watches, I think there's room for an integrated design. I'm not sure which one that is going to be, but at least right now, I'm just gonna let the temperature cool down a little bit.
And what do you think might be next in terms of what we're going to see the industry do? We're seeing the affordable brands numbing at integrated, but there's going to be something next, right?
What I hope for is that I feel like we briefly dabbled in the two-tone, but we never really like sunk our teeth into it. And I kind of hope that's going to be like the next trend. I think, like if we're going to go use car salesman, let's really go use car salesman, right? And I just can't wait until all these micro brands are launching two-tone watches. I think that'll be a glorious day.
Tom, hopes and dreams for the future, post-integrated.
Yeah. I don't know, square dials.
You heard it here first.
Yeah. I was actually gonna say, yeah, we're gonna lean into it harder and go full car salesman. So that's funny that Max and I are aligned on that. So we'll see.
Yeah, I think I'm very much agreed with that. If we're moving from the 70s to the 80s and possibly the 90s, we're talking yellow gold. Also, perhaps smaller watches. The craze of quiet luxury, not showing off what you have, but it being a bit smaller and a bit thinner, but it being gold, but it, importantly, hiding under a cuff. And perhaps the ostentatiousness of the integrated larger watch craze, and being able to see it from a distance may end up being its downfall. Who knows?
I think actually cuffs are going to go, and shirts are just going to integrate straight into your mittens. So be ready for that.
I'm there, Tom. Make it happen. Well, there you go. The future of integrated, as yet undecided. What do you think? Let us know down in the comments below. Thank you so much, Max, for coming along and joining us. Please make sure, dear viewer and listener, to click all the links, download the apps for WatchCrunch, and you can go a crunching with all your watch friends. What's next for you, Max?
We are actually releasing a major update to the WatchCrunch app, I think this week. And it's going to do a lot of bug fixes, and it's going to really revamp some of the features. And, I can't quite say we have like Elon Musk level kind of ambitions to develop a watch super app, but I think that, at some point, if you're not on Crunch, are you really a watch enthusiast?
Well, there you go. WatchCrunch meets OnlyFans in the new update coming up. You heard it here first. Thank you so much for watching. Please do like and subscribe, and check out watchfinder.com for all your watchy needs, except for the WatchCrunch bit, and we'll see you next time. Goodbye.